Hello, 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 citizens of Avina Vlogs. Welcome to episode 43 of the Writers Corner podcast and our newly formatted Writers Corner podcast, where we are going to be foregoing the pop culture news headlines and doing saving the book reviews for their own separate videos on YouTube. So we are going to be doing a couple things. We're going to be talking about Lexington and Fifth, and then we are going to be getting into the main topic of the week. This week's topic: how to turn failure into success. This is a good way for writers and aspiring authors especially, but anyone wanting to be a writer of any kind who gets rejection, and how to turn that rejection into something positive. So, the first thing I want to talk about is Lexington and Fifth. I recently missed a week publishing. We had such a kind of a hectic week here in my personal life going on that I just did not have time to post it. So this weekend you're going to get two chapters. We're going to be dealing with the fallout of Ella coming face to face with someone from her past that she never thought she would see again. And we're going to be getting into the nitty gritty of who could be possibly behind these murders, these attacks. So you're going to get chapters, I believe, 18 and 19 coming up. But yeah, that's going to be coming up this weekend. And you guys can read all of the chapters of Lexington and Fifth, which is my year-long Wattpad project, over on Wattpad.com or the Wattpad app. Just search for Lexington and Fifth or my name, author Anthony Avina. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of today's topic, failure. Just want to talk a little bit about what kind of failure you could be looking at as a writer, how you absorb it, and how not to let it bring you down and turn it into something that's actually positive. And to do that, I'm going to use an example. I recently submitted a short story that I'm actually really proud of called Wrath of the Red Cap. And I submitted to some publishers that I'm actually going to be working on a full novel for. And again, I can't divulge any names or anything. And this, they're great over at this publisher. They're just such amazing people, and they love the story itself, the short story. But they had so many submissions that they couldn't accept my short story at this time. So they, had to decline. They told me they loved the story, they just couldn't accept it. Now, while I rationally I understand, it's a business and there's so many people submitting that you're not going to get it picked every time. I can rationalize it that way. But of course, as being a writer who, created something they're proud of, it bums you out sometimes to hear that your story wasn't quite good enough for something like this. Again, don't blame them. It's not their fault. There's a lot of stories to choose from, and people are going to come into contact with great stories that just don't get accepted. That's just the way the world works. But the first thing I do is what I talked about already, is rationalize it, with everything, all the submissions they got, and all the great quality work that they get, day in and day out. It's impossible to expect that everything you write is going to be accepted. The second thing that I do is I look to the writer that inspired me and think about their beginning stages of being a writer. And for me, that's Stephen King. He spent years and years, from a young age all the way until he was a full-fledged adult, getting rejected. Getting short stories rejected, novels rejected, essays. It wasn't until he was a substitute teacher, barely making ends meet, that a story he really hadn't thought would be his first published novel got accepted, and that was Carrie. And Carrie turned out to be the book that really put Stephen King on the map. But he had written so much before that people are now publishing those stories. The story I love the most is The Dark Tower by Stephen King. And he wrote that when he was, I think he first wrote his first story when he was 19. Um, but yeah, it sat in a trunk, not read for years and years until Stephen King got his first big break, and then he was able to slowly start to bring those books and those ideas back to life. But it's important to remember this story because even an amazing, incredible author like Stephen King has faced rejection on a daily basis and spent years and years being told no. I'm sure even today he has ideas that get rejected. Um, that doesn't mean that they're bad. That doesn't mean that they're not good ideas. It doesn't mean that they're not worth putting out there. So you can't let it bring you down. It's not necessarily a rejection of you. It's a rejection because of too much input, too many other stories. It could be just a preference thing. I mean, some publishers will take a look at your book and they're not a big fan of the genre you wrote in or the kind of characters you made. It happens, and you have to go through a lot of struggle before you make that big break. I just got my first book contract deal after 6 years for the first time, and it was a long process. I've been self-publishing for 6 years, but this is the first publisher that has taken an interest in me and one of my ideas to turn into a full-fledged novel. So that took me 6 years. It takes other authors longer or shorter. It just doesn't matter, but every author, writer deals with failure and rejection. That's how I spin it in my head. I remember stuff like Stephen King's story and how he went through rejection for most of his career before he got to Carrie. Um, Failure is a daily part of being a writer. Now, how do you turn that into a positive thing? Well, you can do a few things. You can save the story for a later date and work on a brand new story, kind of saving the rejected story for, revisiting later on. You can write that new story and submit it to the people who rejected you in the first place. Maybe they'll find something else you wrote is a little bit better for their tastes. Or you can find other publications to put the story that was rejected out there to the world. You can try. There are publishers who might be more interested than the one that rejected you. You never know. Or you can do what I like to do and self-publish. For example, my story Wrath of the Redcap. I'm going to be looking into publishing it through Smashwords, which I've always used Amazon Kindle, but I'm not overly fond of their recent change in policy regarding their sales department. They pay based on the amount of pages that are read through their Amazon Kindle users, and rather than payment based on an author, a reader buying the book. So I'm going to be looking into Smashwords, but that's a whole other story about publishing that we can get into. The point is, if you get rejected, but you still are passionate about the story that was rejected, and you feel like there is an audience for it, self-publish it. In this day and age, with technology being what it is, and with the power of do-it-yourself attitudes, you can really put your work out there and garner a following. I'm going to be publishing Wrath of the Redcap, and I'm going to be doing all the marketing myself. I'm going to be looking for possible artists to collaborate with on the book cover and marketing materials. But I am going to be doing this myself, and it's because it's a short story that I believe in, that I love, that I've had beta readers come up to me and tell me they love it, and I know it can do really well. So, if you believe in your story the way I do, there's nothing wrong with self-publishing it. Doesn't mean it's going to be a New York Times bestseller. It doesn't mean that you're going to get, fame and fortune from it. But there's something very satisfying with seeing something you wrote put out into the universe and seeing people download it. It's a very special feeling. So, that's how you turn a failure into success. The biggest thing that I think you should take away from this, don't ever give up. The failure could be a huge driving force for you. You can use that failure to fuel your need to prove someone wrong. You can motivate yourself. You can say, you know what, I could sit here and wallow in self pity, but rather than that, I would rather pick up myself. I'd rather dust, the stench of failure off of you or off myself and go back into the world and find a way to either move on from what you got rejected for or to put it out there despite what everyone else tells you is wrong. Sometimes you have to be your own cheerleader. You have to be your own cheering section and push yourself to do something because some of the best work isn't discovered right away. Some of the best work is looked over, and it's not until the author or the creator of the said work pushes themselves and puts it out there that they get noticed. I'm reading a memoir book right now by a great creator, writer, actress. Her name is Felicia Day, and in her book she talks about a series that kind of put her on the map called The Guild. It's a web series that she made and did it on a small budget, I should say, on a very small budget. Filmed it for the internet with her and her friends and some other people, and she believed in it. No one else did. TV producers, told her it wouldn't work. Wanted her to take out all the core concepts of the script that she wrote. But instead of giving up, she pushed herself, and with the help of her friends, she made something that is now considered a very big cult classic, especially in the video game industry. That's because she didn't give up, and you guys shouldn't either. If you're passionate the way she was about her web series or about the way I am for Wrath of the Redcap, don't ever give up. You can do it. I believe in you, and so will other people. So, turn that failure into your own personal success. There you guys have it. That was the Writer's Corner, episode 43. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the new format for the podcast. In the comments below, tell me one time that you experienced failure in your career, whether you're a writer as well, or you have something else that you do that involves social media or what have you. Leave your comments down below and tell me how you turned that failure into a success or how you wish to turn it into a success. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Please give this video a big thumbs up, like this video, comment on it, favorite it, and share it. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. It means so much to me if you did. Check out our social media links down below and click the eye in the sky for today's recommended videos, playlists, and more. If you are listening to this on SoundCloud or iTunes, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to our podcast. It means so much to us if you did. Check out our social media links in the description and leave a review. That would mean so much to us. All your, your advice, your criticism, as long as you're respectful, we appreciate it so much because we always are looking to improve the podcast, and it would mean so much to us if you stuck around and hung with us. Thank you for tuning in to the Writer's Corner podcast. We will see you next week for episode 44. This is your host, author Anthony Avina, signing out. Long days and pleasant nights, my friends.